I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife Podcast, episode number 177, Self-Victimization. I used to think of myself as the wife of a porn addict, but I do not think of myself that way anymore, and you don't have to either. In this podcast, I am going to teach you how to manage your mind and your emotions so that you can stop living your life around your husband's pornography addiction. I am going to teach you how to stop being the victim and how to conquer his pornography addiction, even if he never does. I'm Jolene Wynn. I am a certified life coach, and I am a member of the LDS faith and the wife of a former porn addict. And this is a podcast for the porn addict's wife. Hello, my ladies. How are you? I am so excited to be talking to you today. I'm recording this podcast episode a little early. I am headed out on a trip to Turks and Caicos. It's a girls' trip. I'm very excited about it. My mom, a couple of my sisters, one of my sisters-in-law, we're all going, and one of my nieces, and we're going for an entire week, and I'm taking the whole week off of calls, and I'm just going to be working on, business on the back end, all of the back end stuff. That's the stuff nobody tells you about running a business, or I guess they do, but you don't really realize until you're running the business yourself is, I don't hire anybody. I don't have any employees. And so I do all of the back end stuff, all of the emails, all of the posts, all of the graphics, all of the web design, which is why it looks like it does. And so I'm going to be working on that back end stuff, but I won't be taking any calls. I'm taking a week off, which I'm actually really excited about, but that means I'm actually kind of bummed about it too. I was talking to my husband about that, and I said, I'm really going to miss my ladies. And so I will miss you guys while I am gone, and I'm recording this a little early for you. And this is a concept I wanted to talk to you guys today about self-victimization. And this is something that came up on a call today with some of my clients. And I wanted to bring it up because it was so good for them to hear, and it hit and resonated with them so much, and so I wanted to share it with y'all. Before we dive into that, I did want to remind you, for those of you who want to go to the in-person retreat, if you've been thinking about coming to the in-person retreat, it is just a few weeks away, and it is time. As of the time that I'm recording this, I have 4 spots left. It is almost sold out, and now is the time to say yes. So if you feel like that really just calls to you and you want to do it, then I want to encourage you to just say yes. Say yes, even though you're scared. Say yes and come. We would love to have you there. I would love to work with you. The in-person retreat is a time where I get to just work with you one-on-one in a container that I don't ever get to do even just with my clients. I keep it small, I keep it intimate so that it can be very high touch, and I can work with whatever it is that you're going through, and we can overcome it. This retreat will sell out. I know that sounds crazy because there's only a few weeks left and there's still 4 spots. It sold out last year, this same time frame. It's going to sell out again. So you can go to my website, jolenewynn.com/retreat, and you'll be able to get all of the information, all the details, when, where, all of the things, what you can expect, how much it costs, all of it's on there. And you can go on there and find all the frequently asked questions. All of that information is on there. And I would encourage you, again, if you feel called to this, if you were so bummed last year that you missed it, go sign up today so that you don't miss it this year. Okay, so let's talk about self-victimization. I have talked about victim mentality before. There's previous podcast episodes you can go search and go look for. But let's first start with what a victim mentality is. So all I did is I went to Google, okay, and I just typed in victim mentality, and here's what it says. People who have victim mentality have often suffered through trauma or hard times, but haven't developed a healthier way to cope. Okay, now here's what we mean by that is typically when you have some kind of traumatic experience, what that means is that something happened in your life, there was some kind of situation that occurred, and your brain had a traumatic response, which is a very survival instinct response. I was coaching a client on this today, and I said, this is actually a really good thing, and that's what she was talking about too. This is actually a really good thing that our brain does. What it does is when we have a lot of emotion that comes up all at once and it can seem very overwhelming, what our brain does is actually push all of that down in fight or flight. Okay, what our brain will do is actually just suppress all of that emotion just enough so that you can actually keep living. Because if you have too much emotion come up all at once, if you aren't prepared for that, then it can overwhelm you to the point where you can't function. Okay, so what our brain does is it kind of shuts that down temporarily as a survival mechanism so that we can keep moving throughout the day. And this is, again, a really good thing that our brain does, because this enables us to survive and work through a lot of traumatic experiences. The problem is when you don't actually go back and retrain your brain, or if you don't manage your mind and reframe that in your brain, and your brain just continues to run on autopilot, you will just continue to suppress that emotion. But what happens is that emotion doesn't just dissipate, it builds. And so it compounds over time. So that traumatic experience, you have the emotion from that, and then your brain just keeps adding to that until you can't suppress it anymore. And that's when we typically feel overwhelmed. It starts to flow into our life. We start to see a result. So even if you initially found out about your husband's pornography problem and you're like, I don't remember it being that traumatic, over years, it can actually become more traumatic because you have the emotion that you suppressed from the initial event, and then you have everything that you've been adding to it. Does that make sense? So when you have a victim mentality, what happens is you have that initial reaction, and then you haven't developed a healthier way to deal with it. Again, most of the time, ladies, this isn't your fault. It's because no one's ever taught you what to do with it, right? We don't take classes on this. No one teaches this. That's my job as a coach. This is what I do. This is what I teach, right? So in the definition, it says, as a result, these people that have a victim mentality, they develop a negative view of life where they feel that they don't have any control over what happens to them. Sound familiar? This is why I do what I do, because our brains think that we don't have any control over what's happening. We think that the way that we feel, the way that we think, this negative attitude that we have is reality, and we think that that's because of what our husband is doing. Okay, that's victim mentality. We blame him. Our brain thinks that it's all because of him, and the reason why it thinks that is because all of that internal emotion, all of that came up as a result of that traumatic event, which was him having a pornography problem. So of course our brain thinks, okay, let's just get rid of that problem and then we'll get better. But we don't actually have any control over his behavior. And so if we don't, then we just feel like we just have to sit and wait and hang out, right? This is exactly what I teach in my podcast, is how to overcome victim mentality. Victim mentality is starting to take control again. It's to release that negative mindset around everything that's going on, processing all of that emotions that's just been shoved under the surface, and retraining your brain, managing your mind so that you no longer have to have that response. Does that make sense? So I want to start there, and I want to move on. I want you guys to keep that in mind as I move on to self-victimization. Not a lot of you guys and a lot of us struggle with that victim mentality in regards to our husband. But sometimes, a lot of times what I see in my clients and the women that I coach on these calls is that we tend to also have some self-victimization. And here's an example of what that might look like. What we unintentionally do when we aren't managing our mind well, or we have some subconscious beliefs and thoughts running in the background, is we become a victim to ourselves. That's what self-victimization is. We become a victim to ourselves. The way that I see this is mainly in our stories and our emotions, okay? Those are our thoughts and our feelings, okay? That's where we typically become a victim to ourselves. We become a victim to our thoughts, to the story that we tell ourselves. We don't want to let go of the story, even though the story makes us a victim. And the story is just our thoughts about what happened. Okay, so for example, if you have a story about how your husband always looks at other women, how he doesn't desire you, and you have all of this evidence because of all the things that he's done in your past, if you aren't willing to let that go, even if he's no longer looking at it, that's self-victimization. It's being a victim to yourself, to your story, to your thoughts, not being willing to let those go in order to move forward. And one of the reasons that we don't want to let go of our story, one of the reasons why we want to stay a victim to our story, is because it validates how we feel. And we are a victim often to our own emotions. It's very difficult, ladies, to become aware of the emotions that you're feeling and to let them go. Because one of the things that we think that means is that they weren't valid in the first place. We think that letting go of our emotions, processing that emotional pain from that traumatic experience and letting it go is somehow meaning that it wasn't valid in the first place, that we overreacted, or that we condone his behavior, or that it was okay, that we're okay with it. And none of that is true. But we hold on to it because we're afraid of what it means if we let it go. And so we want that emotion to stay with us, and we become a victim to that emotion. We keep the resentment, the pain, the bitterness, all of it within us, and we want it to stay there and feel like we have no control over it leaving. That's staying a victim. We unintentionally keep ourselves the victim when we don't change our thoughts and our feelings, when we keep our stories and we don't process our emotional baggage. That's staying a victim to ourselves. Now, most of the time, the reason that we do that is because one, we are unaware that it's even happening. Again, most of our thoughts are subconscious. We have over 60,000 thoughts a day. We could not possibly be aware of all of them. Our head would explode. We just do not have the attention capacity to pay attention to all of it. We don't have it. Okay. We don't have the energy. We don't have the mental capacity. We don't have the focus to be able to be aware of all of those. And we don't need to be aware of most of them. But the subconscious ones, the ones we're not aware of that are running in the background, are often the ones that are just familiar and our comfort zone. Those are the ones that our brain runs on autopilot. These are the ones that our brain perpetuates as a victim mentality. Right? Our brain, if you never learn how to manage your mind, if you never learn how to become aware of what's going on underneath the surface, then it's just going to perpetuate survival. Because at the end of the day, your lower brain is the one that is running most of the stuff, and its only goal is to make sure that you're alive at the end of the day. So if at the end of the day you're alive, it thinks it has done its job really, really well. And that's all it wants to do, which is great and fine. And again, it's what got you through that traumatic experience. But once you're through that initial hurdle of the traumatic experience, then it's your job to use your prefrontal cortex or your higher brain and to start taking a look at it, to start noticing the patterns that are coming up. And this is why it's so helpful to have a coach. This is why I have a coach, because the subconscious thoughts that I'm thinking, I don't have the energy or capacity to become aware of. What I do become aware of is the results they tend to create. Okay. I become aware that I'm a victim. I become aware that I think I have no control. Right? I become aware that I'm frustrated because I feel like I have no control over X, Y, or Z in my life, right? That's the result I become aware of. I don't know why I'm frustrated. I don't know why I feel like I have no control. And then I bring it to my coach, and my coach helps me see the thoughts that are going on in the background, the subconscious thoughts and beliefs that are creating this result. Does that make sense? Now, one of the other reasons why it's so difficult to become aware of these self-victimizing habits is, again, because of the emotion that we are trying not to feel. Again, our brain, our logic doesn't like emotion. Our brain would rather never feel emotion, and it thinks that anything negative is going to kill us, and so it wants to avoid it at all costs. So this is, again, why it's so important to learn how to manage your mind, because you have to purposefully set aside the lower brain, the survival mechanism that says we should avoid negativity at all costs. And this is when you get to be in charge and to practice saying, no, this is okay. I'm allowing this negative emotion. I'm processing it and I'm allowing it so that I can let it go. I am willing to feel this because I know it's in my best interest later. This is where you make decisions not based off of immediate gratification, right? Your lower brain is always going to make decisions based off immediate gratification and having to do the least amount of work possible, which is why we perpetuate these negative mentalities, this victim mentality. This is why we stay a victim to our story and our emotions, because it's hard work to get rid of it. It's hard work to change your mind. It's hard work to retrain your brain to think new patterns, to create new neural pathways. It's hard work to process the emotion that you have been resisting for so long. And that's exactly what overcomes, that's exactly what conquers the victim mentality. So if you are struggling, if you feel like you can't get past a certain emotion, if you can't get past a certain thought or story, and you know it's a story and you know it's an emotion, then take a look at whether or not you think you have control over it. Because if you think you don't have control over it, that's self-victimization. Let me give you an example. I had a client who was talking about food. Okay, this is something I coach on a lot as a life coach, especially for women, is we coach a lot on food and body image. And she was talking about food, and she was talking about the specific food that she likes to eat. And she kept saying things like, I feel like I have no control. I feel like it just happens. Like I'll just start with one, and then all of a sudden, before I know it, all of a sudden I've finished all of like the whole bag. I can't quit eating it. Okay. And I just can't stop. And I showed her, I said, notice the way that you're even thinking about it is victimizing. Okay. And I want you guys to take whatever it is that you struggle with, whatever habit you feel like you can't break, whatever belief you feel like you can't shift, whatever emotion you feel like you can't get past, right? Like I want to get over this resentment and I just can't. I just can't stop feeling resentful toward my husband, whatever it is. And I want you to notice the thoughts that you think about it. Okay. The story that you tell yourself about it, the feelings that you have are what's keeping it there. Okay. So just like my client, she was thinking thoughts that almost put it outside of her control. And because of that, she was staying a victim to this inanimate object, to this food item that she felt like had more control over her than she does. Does that ever sound familiar, right? And that's what happens. We feel like we are a victim to our emotions. It's like, well, I had really good intentions of talking to him nicely, but I just got so angry. That's us being a victim to ourselves, to the feelings that we feel, right? It's like, well, I had all of these intentions to get past this thought and to start changing how I felt about my body and changing these thoughts, but I don't know. I just can't seem to get past it because they've been there for so long. That is being a victim to ourselves, to the thoughts that we're thinking. And also, I want to go back to the victim to our story. When you keep the story that your husband's the bad guy, that there's nothing you can do, that you just have to wait for him to get past this before you can move forward, or this is just how it's always going to be. It might even be apathetic. You might even just like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. And then you become a victim to the apathy. Whatever story it is that you tell, you become a victim to it unless you decide to change it on purpose. And the minute you decide that, you leave the victim mentality behind. Because again, part of the victim mentality is a feeling that you don't have any control over what happens to you. And if you decide to start changing what happens to you, then it's the first step out of victim mentality. This is why I have a program that I charge money for. The podcast is free. I love it. I love being able to give that to you guys. This is why I charge for my program, because it takes effort. It takes a conscious decision, and it takes some problem solving to join, to figure out how to pay for it. And it's such a powerful experience for the women that do, because that is the first step out of victim mentality. And that is a crucial shift in order to start moving forward, in order to start looking at those hard things, to start facing all of the emotions that have been suppressed, all of that emotional baggage that's been hanging around, all of the stories in their head, all the thoughts that have been hanging out for so long. It takes courage to conquer them, and it takes confidence. And that confidence starts to get built when you start taking action, when you start problem solving, when you start taking control and deciding on purpose that you are going to change and shift, and signing up for a program, figuring out how to pay for it, learning how to come on the calls, getting the courage to get coached in front of people. That is the shift that needs to happen in order to create the result that you're looking for. That is the power of victim mentality. So if you feel like you are stuck in victim mentality, I want to encourage you to notice that it's really yourself keeping you a victim. Look around, notice in your life what it is you feel like you have no control over, and that is an indication that you are self-victimizing. And if you're doing that, then ladies, this is the best news I could ever give you, because that means you have 100% control over it changing. And that's what I want to offer. I want to offer that you start taking control. I want to offer that you start shifting it today. You don't have to wait for anything else to change. You just have to decide that you're ready to start doing it, and then you go. It's totally possible. The life that you want, ladies, is waiting for you on the other side of action and control, and you are 100% in control of your life. I love you, ladies, so much. I can't wait to talk to you guys next week on another episode. So take care. All right, ladies, it's time to rise up and take charge of your healing, and I have the best way for you to do it. I have created a lifetime access coaching program that I have designed specifically for you and exactly what you're going through right now. This is where I help you develop a personal mastery of all the tools that you're learning here on the podcast in order for you to create a permanent change. Go to my website, jolenewynn.com. You will find all the information there, and you can sign up today, and we will start going forward. I can't wait to see you there.